No, it didn't. Hold on. Uh-oh.
Need help?
So it says it's going, but it also doesn't show it on YouTube. Oh, it does. It does. Okay, okay.
Okay.
Wait, it's really lagged. Okay, hold on.
It should be behind.
It's me listening to what I'm saying.
Okay.
Okay, it is. The volume is, like, good, I think.
If it sounds good to you.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it sounds fine.
Okay.
It's so funny 'cause it's like backtracking now. Oh, you did a thumbs up button. Like,
Did it do like the thumbs up thingy?
yeah, because
Oh.
it's Apple.
All right. Well,
Okay,
is it ready to
hold on. Let me get back.
go? Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Jonah's College Football Show. This is the first episode, our inaugural episode. I've got my studio set up here. I've been watching a lot of Josh Pate's college football show, and my fiance also suggested I start a podcast. So I'm here now after buying some equipment. I'm really excited to get this show started, and we're going to have a fun list of topics for you today. Today, we're going to be talking about a little bit of conference championship game reactions after the slate that happened this last week. Get my paper here real quick. Okay. The first game that I'm going to talk about is going to be the Big 12 championship. The Big 12 champion was Arizona State, and they won by about a mile. It was not very close. I caught a little bit of the game, definitely the second half of it. Once it was it was basically that part where they got like 3 turnovers in a row, and it was just like, oh man, this is getting ugly real quick. And as somebody with a little bit more like favor in the Big 12, that's generally the one that I watch. It was pretty interesting because I don't think that we've seen a team get dominated like that in the title game for a while. I mean, UT beat up Oklahoma State last year, but that didn't really feel like a close game. This one felt like it could be a close game, but it ended up being not very close at all. So, a couple thoughts. Arizona State, really good. Scatterboo was a beast. He's had 3 touchdown games, 3 games in a row to end the season, which is massive. I think if he was on a more preseason popular team, he might have been in this Heisman race. We're gonna talk about that a little bit later too. But there was like, I don't know, it just felt like Iowa State was on the back foot the whole game and Arizona State was on the front foot the whole game. I don't know what the issue is for Matt Campbell and co. I mean, he's a great coach. He obviously is the best coach Iowa State's ever had, but he just can't seem to win the championship game. I mean, he played Oklahoma. They almost won. That was the best team Iowa State's probably ever had, and they just barely lost. This year, it looked like they were favored, but they just couldn't get it done, and that just seems to be the case with them. I'm intrigued to see how they do in their bowl game. They've got a lot of people who should still be playing. I don't know how many opt-outs they're going to have, but after a game like that, usually the feeling going into the bowl game is like, can we just survive this bowl game? We got blown out in our championship game, but can we survive? And yeah, I mean, they should still have some pretty decent prospects heading into next year, but who knows? I mean, Iowa State seems to be up and down depending on what year it is and kind of where in their development. They're a team that's good, like really good once every 3 years, pretty good. The other 2 years out of they're usually pretty good. So, with Arizona State looking towards the playoffs, they have their matchup. They're going. Oh no, they get their bye. Yeah. I was thinking of something else, but they get their bye this week, which should be really good for them. They get to. I actually really like their draw, because Arizona State is weirdly, like, it feels like a good matchup against Texas or against Clemson. I don't know if it's just that they played so well in this last Big 12 title game that I'm kind of giving them the benefit of the doubt in that regard, and Texas didn't look that great. Defensively, Texas looked great, but I'm intrigued to see because whoever wins, I think Clemson has a chance, but I don't think it's a very good chance. But whoever wins that championship game, or that playoff game, the playoff semifinal, quarterfinal, then they're going to play an Arizona State team that gets a little bit of rest, gets to watch the game. It's probably going to come out with a chip on their shoulder, which is something we'll see a lot of, I think, in these playoffs. And who knows whether it'll lead to any significant upsets or not. But on to the Big Ten championship game. Man, it was a high scoring. I didn't get to catch most of this one. I was watching the ACC championship game for the most part. But the Big Ten championship game I saw was like 45 to like 39, 38, 37, something like that. I was really confused because both these teams have had pretty solid defenses, especially Penn State. You don't ever expect Penn State to get in a foot race game. It was kind of funny. I was looking, I was like, man, Oregon has like 40-something points. I was like, that game's over. And then I was like, wait, no, Penn State, has a chance. And they've got 30-something points. So I was like, okay. Kind of an odd game for the Big Ten championship game. The sense, like the feeling around these games has been a little bit more apathetic. It feels like there's not really much, like, I don't know, the fact that there's no real consequences, and even with the way the playoff is structured, Penn State ends up getting an easier road, and you can debate whether or not, like, Boise State earned the third seed, SMU earned their seed, whatever, you can debate it, but I feel like anybody would take Penn State's road, even SMU or Boise State. And so I think that, like, with that, it kind of made the game a little bit less, like, I don't know, less serious. Not that the players didn't care. Dan Lanning cares. Speaking of Dan Lanning in Oregon, Dan Lanning clearly cares. I loved his response on the College Football Playoff Selection show, where they ask him, they're trying to get him to say something like, oh, be mad at the playoff committee or whoever for putting you in a tough road. And he just goes on and he says, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who we play, because all that matters is that we go out and we win our game. And I think that mindset is exactly why they're the number one ranked team in the country and the only undefeated team right now. It seems like they have a really good chance to run the table. And we'll see. They're going to get the winner of Tennessee and Ohio State, and Oregon should be favored. I don't know what to make of Ohio State, but Oregon should be favored no matter who comes out. And it'll be an interesting game for sure. I think that one's in the Rose Bowl, which will be really fun. But yeah, so speaking of other teams, one team that I thought was more like Oregon that didn't end up being more like Oregon was Texas. Texas came into this game with everything to prove. They had lost to Georgia beforehand at home, and then they had this chance to come in and really cement themselves like, hey, we're the top dog, this is our conference now, especially with Alabama seemingly being a little bit down this year, and with a lot of variance, there's a lot of parity in the SEC this year, and Texas had the perfect chance with an easier schedule to take control of it. But I mean, I don't know, does Sark have a Kirby Smart problem? Because that's 2 games now where it felt like Texas did everything it could to not win the game. Like, if you're thinking about the way the game went, like that first half stat line where it's like 50 yards to 200 yards, but it's like a 3-point game, or I don't remember exactly what the score was at halftime. That was so emblematic of what UT felt like against Georgia, and it kind of makes you think, like, is there like what UT felt like against Georgia in the regular season, and it kind of makes you think, like, what is the problem there? Because it's clearly not talent. They have all the talent in the world. Sark said Ewers played well. I mean, I don't, from the eye test wise, it doesn't look like Ewers felt natural or felt like, really like he ever found his way in that game. And I'm surprised we didn't see Arch Manning. It's just, whatever it is, they just couldn't do it. Like, they had, when they were driving, before the end of the game, or before the end of regulation, when they were driving, and they had the chance to go and score, they ended up scoring a field goal, but they had a chance to go and score a touchdown. I thought that was the moment that they would be able to finally do it. I thought, not that not that anything about what they were doing, but the fourth down play was really good. They made their way down the field, and just when they got into that 20, it was just not good. Um, like a massive stat. I think it was, what's it called? They threw the ball 10 times in the 25, like from the 25 to the end zone. Texas did. I'm not trying to call them UT because Tennessee fans will get mad at me, but they threw it 10 times inside the 25, and they did not complete a single pass. That is, and if you can't run the ball, because Texas could not run the ball yesterday, there were like 2 or 3 Georgia defenders in the backfield, at least a yard deep every single time they ran the ball. But when you get that kind of bad performance in terms of your passing offense in the red zone or near the red zone, you're hardly ever going to win a game like that. So it'll be interesting to see. I think Texas is still going to be good. They're going to get kind of what a lot of people would probably consider the flukiest team, Clemson, who kind of had a weird game against SMU that we'll talk about here in a second. But it'll be interesting to see how Texas prepares. I don't know. I mean, Sark versus Dabo, a lot of people have their doubts about both of them. I'm intrigued. I think this is going to be a fun matchup for one. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. So, and speaking of Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers, Clemson starts off 21-7 against SMU, I believe. Yeah, it was 21-7, and it was the kind of game that you expect. It's kind of the game that you would expect to go that way. At the start, it looks like Clemson just, they take over. They're ready. They want to be there. Everything, Dabo has them ready. Everybody counted them out, but they're still there. And so, come out swinging, get a few turnovers, get a couple scores up quick like that. And then it looks like they're going to kind of slowly pull away, but SMU just keeps pounding away. And if I had to guess, that game was only won by Clemson because time ran out. And this is no discredit to Clemson. They played really well for the most part. And it's just when you see a game like that and you know that SMU is like power rated stronger, things of that nature, like they caught up, and it looked like it was their comeback game. It looked like it was the game that they were going to find a way to win, even though they shouldn't have. By all metrics, when you turn the ball over 2 times and lose 2 scores to start the game, you're probably going to lose that game like 10 times out of 10. At least 9 times out of 10. But SMU came back. They did exactly what a good team would do, which is keep their head down, keep staying in the game as much as they could. But without that, I don't know. With all that they did, it still felt like they found a way to. It still felt like they were the better team. Sorry, I kind of got lost my train of thought, but yeah, SMU to me came out of this game honestly looking like the better team, and like they caught the worst possible outcome of this game. It'll be interesting to see. I kind of like the matchup for them and Penn State, not because I think Penn State's bad or anything like that. Clearly, last week they showed they could score a lot, even against a good defense like Oregon's. But I don't know, something about SMU, small private school from DFW, going up to Penn State, just feels, and it's a whiteout, a noon kickoff. It just feels like the kind of game that SMU can be more, like, if SMU has that next gear, that mental next gear, then they can do it. So, yeah. But with all that, actually, I also wanted to talk about the Mountain West Conference Championship game. No transition there. I didn't have anything to go for you. But another interesting game would be Boise State, who played UNLV this last weekend. They had... I was able to catch most of this game. I was actually watching a Mamma Mia play while I while I watched part of this game too, to be honest. But it was actually a really good play. But um, during the game, you could. I mean, it's the same story that a lot of these, um, you know, these games have with Ashton Jonty in them. Uh, everybody, I mean, loading the box, trying to make sure that he doesn't beat them because he's the kind of player that can tear up a game like that if you don't play him like that. It'll be interesting to see. I have it in my notes like what can Boise State do in these playoffs? They get the winner of Penn State and SMU, and if I was Boise State, I'd be happy about that. Any team that gets Penn State should be happy in the sense that Penn State doesn't win a lot of games against good teams. Any team that gets Penn State that's not Ohio State or Oregon should be maybe a little worried because Penn State doesn't lose to teams that aren't Ohio State or Oregon. So it'll be interesting. James Franklin still has not shown that he can win it. And I think in any world where Boise State beats Penn State or SMU beats SMU beats Penn State, you're gonna have some questions going around because the thought is that you can at least beat everybody else, even if it's not Ohio State, but or like the team at Ohio State's level, but that would be a disappointment for the Penn State program, especially considering how they've been at the top and like the whole year. But yeah, but the last conference championship game that I want to go over for a little bit was the American Athletic Conference Championship. I didn't get to watch most of this one. I did get to keep up with the score and what was going on, but Army. So Tulane was looking pretty good for a while there. They had a nice winning streak coming along. They have a good quarterback. I think it's Mansa. I'm pretty sure I said that correctly. He just entered the portal today, so we'll see what happens with that. But leading up to that point, they were doing pretty good. And then they just kind of fell apart at the end. It was like they had a lot of people believing in them and people advocating that they should be the one, that if it's about the best teams and they should be the one to get the playoffs, and they kind of fell flat on their face. So, and that kind of continued in this game. Army came out, kind of controlled it from the beginning to the end. Obviously, Tulane made some plays, wasn't just completely dead, but it was really an Army game the whole way. And Army is an interesting case to me because I feel like if they had played Notre Dame at the beginning of the year and did that exact same thing, I feel like they might be getting more respect. It's just because of the timing they played Notre Dame was a little unlucky for them. But at the same time, I don't think they should have made the playoffs over any other team. I think Boise State deserves it more. I think obviously Big 12, ACC, SEC, Big 10 deserve it more. So a good year for Army though. Bryson Daly, 13. Quarterback had I think he was tied for the most rushing touchdowns with Ashton Junty in the entire country, which is insane. I mean, I don't know. I haven't watched too many of Army's games, so I don't know if he's getting a lot of these from the 1 yard, 2 yard, but I know that he's a good runner. I actually saw him play. No. Yeah. I saw him play against UTSA last year, and he looked hard. He looked hard to bring down. So, like that was a game where he kind of came on my radar, and then this year he kind of had his coming out party for this year. So, with that, speaking of the other person who ran for 29 yards, or 29 touchdowns, 29 yards is nothing, 29 touchdowns this year, we got to talk about the Heisman conversation. The Heisman has come down to two players. I think, like I mentioned earlier, Scadaboo could have been in it if they had more preseason hype, but it's down to two. And really, I mean, if you talk to most people, it's down to one. But Ashton Junty is the running back who is up for the Heisman, and he has what has been one of the most impressive running back seasons we've seen in a long time. Let me see. I have my paper here with his stats. First in running back yards, he has like 2,400 or something like that. He's okay. Barry Sanders should always get the most respect for how much, like how many yards he got in how little games, and he didn't even get his bowl game counted. But here, I mean, Ashton Junty is only like what, like 100 something yards off of Barry Sanders. He's 600. He's about 600 yards ahead of the nearest. And this was actually, I'm not sure if this is accurate because I think I looked at this last week before the game, but he was at least 600 yards ahead of the next rusher, who's behind him, which is, I mean, he was the most used, highest production running back this year by far, not even close. First in touchdowns at 29, tied with um, Bryson Daly from Army. 7.3 yards per carry on. I mean, you saw most of his games. He was at like 25 to 32 carries per game. So to put up 7.3, I mean, he's always at least 150 yards or more every single game. It felt like a disappointing game for him was under 150 yards. So yeah, and then so here's the thing. There's a lot of talk about who played who and how much Mountain West should be weighed versus how much Power 4 should be weighed versus this, that, and the other. I mean, I think Ashton Junty gave us a show at the beginning of the year. And you might be like, well, certain teams weren't where they should be at the beginning of the year because they're still figuring out. I don't think we should discredit him for that. I think at the same time, you could argue that Ashton Junty hasn't had as big of performances towards the end of the year because teams are playing 8-9 guys in the box. You're a bad coach if you do not stop Ashton Junty from winning the game because I mean, if you see this, you can see it on the screen. At the best team in the country, he had 192 yards, 7.7 yards average, and 3 touchdowns. But he had a big game against Oregon. On the road to 3 touchdowns. Boise State almost beat the best team in the country on the road in like the second week of the year. And at the time, we didn't know that it would be where it is now, but it was a game between 2 good teams. And when you look at that game, people will say, well, they struggled against Wyoming or Idaho the next week. I don't remember which team it was. But I don't think that takes away from Junty's performance at all. I mean, yeah, maybe Oregon had not figured everything out, but he absolutely tore that game up against a good defense. And I mean, if you're going to try to argue that he hasn't been able to produce like that later on, it's because people saw him do that against Oregon. If people see him do that, if you're a Mountain West team and you see Ashton Junty run for 192 and 3 touchdowns against Oregon, and you think, man, let's play 7 or 6 in the box. Let's just chill. Like it'll be fine. Then your coach probably got fired this year if that was your idea, and a lot of coaches probably still got fired while loading 9 in because Ashton Junty still ran for hundreds of yards and they still won every single one of their Mountain West Conference games. And this other game that I thought was interesting was the game. The Mountain West. He played UNLV twice, by the way, but the Mountain West Conference Championship game against 20 UNLV this last week. He had 20. He was the MVP, the offensive MVP for the game, and he had 209 yards and 6.5 yards per carry with 1 touchdown. And a lot of people will say they think he's stat padded. There's a lot of stat pad accusations in this Heisman race. I think that both did their fair share of putting the numbers up, and I think it's fine to do. Here, wait, I'm getting some word that we're having some technical difficulties. Let me see something real quick.
maybe it's just you.
Well.
What happened to the audio?
I have no idea. This thing is still on.
No.
Is it plugged in correctly?
Yeah, it is. I checked it.
Sorry about this.
Oh, wait. I think it's your headphones.
Oh.
Because I can hear it on my phone.
Oh, well, then we stopped it for nothing. It's okay. Okay, sorry about that. Had some technical difficulties. Thought we didn't have audio for a second. But as I was talking about, let's just get straight back into it. Ashton Jonty's performance against UNLV, good game. It doesn't, I don't know, the way they use him, clearly they trust him for all the big plays, and he makes the big plays. But there was not really, I don't know, it feels like they're trying to get him as many yards as possible, and I think they have every right, if they want to put him on the field as long as they can. And I don't think that in that game he's doing any stat padding, anything more than what you might, normally do in especially in a championship game. So Ashton Jonty for me has been, it's okay. I caught on when I thought he was gonna break Barry Sanders' record at the beginning of the year. I guess I didn't think he was gonna do it, but he was on track to do it. And anybody who's on track to beat that record deserves to win the Heisman, in my opinion, just because that's one of the greatest college football records. But the fact that he hasn't gotten to it is not necessarily an indictment on him, and the fact that he's even close should be, he's obviously clearly in New York. But I think that makes this an actual debate as to whether or not him or the other guy that's running for this, Travis Hunter, who should win the Heisman. So speaking of Travis Hunter, I think a lot of people saw that one ESPN graphic that said he's done like 400 something snaps, or I don't know how many it was like 300, 400 snaps, and they thought, oh man, they're just saying that he's just running around doing cardio snaps. If you're a serious college football fan, you understand that the snap count that he's actually doing is actually impressive. It may not be a stat for a Heisman, like it may not be an actual stat that a Heisman winner would want to live by, but I mean, in terms of, we can look at the two ways that he played the game. So as a receiver, he was 5th in yards, he was 2nd in touchdowns, he was tied, and then as a corner he was tied for 15th in interceptions. So he's doing good on both sides of the ball. He's actually easily one of the top 7-5, probably even better wide receivers. Like, that's generous to others in the country. There's not really a lot of he doesn't have a lot of flaws as a receiver. He's consistent. He's good at going deep. He's good at playing short. He gave Baylor nightmares. Baylor's my favorite team. He gave Baylor nightmares because he was just all over the field, even though I guess he didn't have a big Heisman moment in that game. Well, actually he did. He caused the fumble at the end, but we'll talk about that game in a minute. But yeah, I feel like the people's argument that he's just okay at both sides, completely disingenuous, and the argument that he's just running around doing cardio, completely disingenuous. I think he has a legit case. He's doing something that we haven't seen. I don't whether or not he deserves to be the Heisman, because he's clearly, he's going to go 2 or 3 in the draft for a reason. He's a good player. He's a solid player. But I guess it depends on what you like the most. Do you want somebody who does 2 things really well, one thing like extremely well, one thing really well, or do you want somebody who did one thing perfectly, pretty much? And I think I lean Ashton Jonty a little bit more, because, for example, in their big games, I listed all of Ashton Jonty's stats, but in Travis Hunter's big games, against Baylor, I only say this because Baylor went 8-4 at the end of the year. I guess in the beginning of the year it didn't seem like a big game, but at the end of the year it was one of their more important ones. Against Baylor, he had 7 receptions, 130 yards, and 1 forced fumble, which won the game for them. He showed up in this game. I told you he was kind of a problem for the Bears. But if you look at the other game he played against a 8-4 Big 12 team, was Kansas State. Colorado ended up having a really easy schedule, and they still didn't make the Big 12 championship. But um, but 3 receptions, 26 yards, and 2 tackles. That is a no-show for somebody at Travis Hunter's level. There is, in the biggest games, he wasn't necessarily always there. And that's not to say that he didn't do his fair share in general or anything like that. But amongst the best games, I mean, he was hit or miss, to be honest. And along with that, he played with probably the best quarterback in the country. Yeah, I feel confident. I feel like Shedeur. This isn't about Shedeur, but Shedeur got that letter sent out that had him as a Heisman candidate as well. So he's playing with one of the best players in the country, and yet there's still plenty of games where he doesn't really have the best games against the best teams. So, I mean, if I had to say who it was, I feel like the argument for Hunter is based on the fact that he's reminiscent of the really fun players like Dion. He has an awesome story with, he's a great kid, all those kinds of things. But I feel like if you're going for who's the best player who did the most on a good team, it's got to be Junty. I think he's the best player in college football. I don't think that the best player is always going to go first in the draft or anything like that, because I think Junty might be a top 10 pick or something like that, but I don't know if he's definitely not going first. But in my opinion, getting your team to the conference championship, taking your team from the conference championship to the playoffs, and a first seed for a Mountain West team is a good accomplishment. It's an accomplishment, and Ashton Junty has been at the forefront of the year the whole time. So he had all the options to trip up and stumble along the way, and he really didn't. And I think he should be rewarded for that, because he has had one of the best seasons that we've seen from a running back in a long time. But speaking of great running backs, another school that has some really good running backs is Alabama. Alabama got left out of the college football playoff this last week, and they got left out for SMU. Whew. There's been a lot of talk about what the ramifications for college football are based on this decision by the committee, and I've some things to say. I was thinking about this yesterday as they were talking about it, of course. And the big argument seemed to be that ESPN was pushing, and some people on Twitter, was that Alabama getting in would mean that strength of schedule, well, actually specifically out of conference strength of schedule matters, and SMU getting in would mean a conference championship game matters. I personally think both of them actually agree with SMU and not Alabama. If you're talking about out of conference, SMU played against against BYU. SMU's only loss the whole regular season was to BYU, who they played out of conference and lost to by 3. And Alabama played it's not their fault that Wisconsin wasn't good, but they played at 5-7 Wisconsin, and they beat the crap out of them. So, but if you look at both of their schedules, I think I would give the nod to SMU's being a more difficult schedule. SMU did get BYU and TCU at home, and they did lose one of those, so it's not like that's super impressive. But if you're arguing who had the harder schedule, would I take, who was it? It was like Houston Christian, BYU, TCU, and one other team. I'm sure it was some group of 5 team. Or would I take, I think it was Western Kentucky, USF, Mercer, and Wisconsin. I'm probably taking Alabama's out-of-conference schedule if I'm choosing to play a game. I mean, winning at Wisconsin is not a bad thing. It's not like it should hurt them or anything, but it didn't. None of Alabama's out-of-conference things hurt them. And it's weird to see people online saying that these things hurt them, because there's not really... Oh, okay. There's not really any, any proof that Alabama's out of conference schedule was harder. And I feel like people are just saying that because they need some way to feel like they can argue that Alabama not getting in justifies the SEC and certain people to try to change the way the playoff is done. And the playoff does need some changes. But in this regard, I feel like the decision not only supports strength of schedule, but it supports conference championship games, and it supports out of conference scheduling. If SMU lost to a weaker team in the out of conference, they didn't lose to BYU, they probably wouldn't have. They probably would have gone 12-0 if they played a team like Mercer in November. But if SMU had played that, they wouldn't have gotten credit for that being Alabama's getting discredited for losing to 2-6-6 teams. SMU is not getting discredited for losing to 2-6 teams because they didn't play 2-6 teams that they lost to. And SMU additionally, they had an easier conference schedule, because I would say that SMU had probably one of the easier ACC schedules, on top of the fact that ACC is a little bit weaker than, they're weaker than the SEC. But if you think about it, the out of conference for SMU was tougher than Alabama's, so SMU gets rewarded. Good. That's completely against what people have been saying it is, which it just made no sense to me. I had no, it doesn't make any sense why people would argue that. And then additionally, strength of schedule was actually, I feel like people are saying, oh, well, this means that, there's no way the SEC should go to 9 games, which they were never going to go to 9 games anyway. They want, they're trying to do what's best for what they feel like is best for their teams, and so they're never going to go to 9 games anyway. But the strength of schedule for Alabama was what kept them in the running for the playoff. If Alabama played, if it was flipped and SMU had Alabama's wins and Alabama had SMU's wins, and you were just looking at the blind resume, you would say SMU's resume was better, but you would probably argue that Alabama should still be in the playoff because they only lost 1 game, and in that regard, SMU would have lost 3 games, even if they had good wins. The fact that people are saying that strength of schedule was not respected when SMU had 2 more wins to Alabama's 2 more losses, it's crazy. The reason those 2 teams are being compared is because Alabama's strength of schedule is so much stronger, and people are saying, hey, they're only 1 spot worse. We know they have 2 less losses, or 2 more losses, but they're only 1 spot worse because the strength of schedule that they played was harder. So in that regard, I feel like it protected the strength of schedule too. If you're saying it doesn't, I feel like you're just upset that 9-3 Alabama didn't get in over 11 or 12 and it was 11-2 SMU, but it was 11-1 because if you're comparing their regular season. Additionally, I feel like this protects. What was the third point? Not just the out of conference, not just the strength of schedule. Oh, this protects the conference championship game, of course, because SMU plays a close game in the conference championship game. I told you earlier I thought they played better towards the end of the game than Clemson, and they felt like they were the better team, but that game didn't hurt them enough to knock them behind Alabama, and Alabama didn't jump above them for sitting at home and not doing anything. The committee's decision is not the problem this year. I think the committee did actually a really great job. Ward Manuel gave pretty good explanations this Sunday about why they made the decisions they did. To me, it is not a question of whether or not the committee got it right. It's whether or not the format will be sustained and whether or not the format is sustainable. I like it personally. I don't have an issue with it. I think if you're Oregon, or if you're Oregon, you have a right to be probably a little frustrated. And if you're Penn State, you're probably like, okay, well, that worked out for us. But for everybody else, I think it's fair. I think you could argue that there's 2 things that could be changed. I've seen a lot of people talk about these 2 things, which is 1, reseeding after the first round. I think that's fair. I would be fine with that. And 2, not having just 4 auto buys. I always wanted conference conference championship winners to play a home game. In my mind, I was thinking, like before the 12 team became a thing, anything, when it was just 4 teams and they were discussing expanding, I was thinking 8 teams with 6 champions, because that was when it was still Power 5, and those, like, the top 4 get a home game, and the bottom 4 have to play on the road. So with that, I mean, I don't like, I have some issues with the format, but they're not the same issues that other people are bringing up. I think the current format is fine. I think it's going to get changed because I think the powers that be in college football have a little bit more desire to have teams like Alabama in than SMU. But I don't think that it's necessarily like some huge thing that needs a ton of change. I thought it was pretty good. I think maybe the idea of a committee, I saw a lot of people talk about BCS rankings. I feel like maybe the way we rank teams should be different. I think it was a post it was a Twitter link that I clicked on, probably not a great idea, that went to like a Reddit post or like a forum about doing like a quad system for college football. I really like that idea because I feel like when you do a quad system, you can actually respect the people who have done a lot in their games. I feel like one team, we'll talk about BYU a little bit later and whether or not they got appreciated, but yeah, so I feel like a quad system would be a great way to kind of work out these things and appropriately handle quality wins and bad losses, because I feel like currently they're either, when it works for them, they're too high on quality wins, and when it doesn't work for them, they're too low on quality losses. And one of the things that I feel like a lot of people have had issues with is that the committee is never consistent. From year to year, they change what they feel like, or people would say they change what they feel like will get the teams they want into the playoffs. And I feel like if it was just consistent, whether or not it's right, it would be fair. Okay, if you just had 4 years where it was the exact same criteria, whether it's we want the teams with the best strength of schedules, don't care who does, everybody put as many tough teams on your schedule as you can, and it will help you. Or if you said we just want everybody to go 12-0, everybody take the tough games off your schedule, go 12-0, do that. But if it was consistent, I feel like people would have less reason to be upset. But because it's subjective, it's a committee that decides all those things, that's what makes it difficult. But yeah, so man, SMU over Alabama, I was happy about it. I know a lot of people weren't. Overall, I'm actually really excited about these playoffs. I was looking at these matchups, and you might see, like, you're going to see a lot of stuff about, oh, well, this is an 8-point spread, 9-point spread, 10-point spread, whatever. I'm excited. I think Clemson at Texas is fun. Even if Clemson gets blown up, I think it's going to be fun. I think SMU at Penn State is fun. I think Indiana, Notre Dame, battle for Indiana, that's fun. Ohio State, Tennessee, probably the most, it's the closest and also the most talented matchup of the first round, it seems. That one could go either way. Winner is going to end up playing Oregon. Yeah, I think. And then once you get to the second round, then it starts being Arizona State and Boise State and Georgia and Oregon. I feel like it's really exciting. I feel like this playoff is going to be fun. There's probably going to be some blowouts. There's going to be some rationale made off of blowouts. There's going to be some. There's probably going to be an upset or two, and there's going to be some rationale made off of upsets. But it's going to be fun to watch the whole way through. Okay, that was a lot. I'm not done yet. I have a little bit of a Big 12 last 15 minutes that I'm going to want to do for the show. But make sure if you're not following me, I think a lot of people who are watching right now followed me from Twitter or X. I don't like to call it X, but it's... but so on Twitter, I am Jonah's CFB Show, Jonah, JONAH, CFB Show. Follow me on Twitter. You'll get some of my ideas. I don't tweet too much, but when it comes to bigger things, I'll probably chime in here and there, and it'll also tell you when the next show is. So as of right now, I don't have any schedule, but I do want to be finding maybe like once a week of a time to do a show, because this is fun. and I got a lot to say. You can tell I'm running out of breath with how much I'm talking. So, Big 12, the last 15 minutes I'm going to be talking to the Big 12. I personally have grown up a Baylor fan, so if you have any grievances with any takes I have related to the Big 12, I'm probably a little biased, to be completely honest. It's my show, so I'm going to be a little biased. And I think that it's something that I want to talk about more. I was debating between doing a full CFB show or a full Big 12 show, and I ended up being like, I just want to talk about everything. So, but I wanted to talk about Big 12 this last fourth of the show. So, the main question for this playoff picture, everything's time, was how, for me as a Big 12 fan, and specifically a Baylor fan, was as a big Baylor fan in the Big 12, it feels like the Big 12 is getting snubbed or disrespected by the committee. It took a long time for me to say that, but that's what it feels like. BYU is 10-2. Okay, they have a win at SMU, who's the 11th team in the country right now. They only lost to Kansas. They only lost to Arizona State, who won the Big 12. I think BYU is an example of what's wrong with the way that doing a committee works. By all standards, like if you've seen, BYU in 2020 was 10-2 as well. They had a similar record. They played a similar amount of games. I think they played lower competition because they weren't in the Big 12. They played a lot of Pac-12 teams, Pac-2 maybe, but they didn't have as tough of a schedule, like strength of schedule or strength of record wise, as they did now. And yet, in the college football playoff rankings, they were ranked way ahead compared to where they are now, despite being a Power 4 conference. To me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I mean, BYU won, like I was saying earlier, they won at SMU. They won at Baylor, which that game wasn't as big when it happened, but the way Baylor ended the season and the capability that they had, they played the Baylor team that went on to win 6 straight games and destroy Kansas. BYU beat up K-State like crazy. I have no reason, or I have no idea why the committee felt like they were only the 17th, I think it was 17th or 18th best team in the country this year. It feels like that was purely because if they were put in that range of teams on the bubble, then you would actually have to consider them, and they would have a better argument than an Alabama maybe, just purely based off of ranked wins and stuff like that, and like resume. But I mean, I digress, because with that, it felt like there was almost like they, if you saw, they dropped 6 spots after they lost their first game. I think they dropped from 8 to 6. No. Were they? I think they were either 6 or 8, and they dropped like 8 or 6 spots. And then after that, and that was when they lost to Kansas, which relatively, I mean, it's a bad loss. That was before Kansas kind of went on their tear, but bad loss. Or that was at the beginning of Kansas's tear, pretty much midway through, kind of. But it was a bad loss, so understandably. And then they go and they lose close to an Arizona State team that was kind of on fire and ended up winning the conference championship, and they drop a bunch again. It felt like the committee did not believe that BYU was good enough to be in the top 10, and they dropped them according to what they believed they were, not necessarily how good they actually were or how good that they had shown to be based on who they beat and, you know, the games they played. And I feel like this is emblematic of a larger issue with the college football playoff. It's like an invitational. It's not a true determinant. I think this year I feel like it's going to be more of a true determinant of a national champion. But in any given year where teams can be left out on perception alone, you're going to have so many issues, and it's probably the biggest issue I have with college football is that the playoff is an invitational, and it's based on who people think um, are most worthy, and people have a ton of reasons for thinking that certain teams are the most worthy. It is entirely momentum based. For example, that Kansas team that won 3 games against um, ranked opponents and did it in pretty impressive fashion. They played at Baylor, and they got blown out. So if you had looked beforehand, the spread on that game was Kansas -1, or it was leaning towards Kansas, and the game did not show that in any way. And I think it was purely because the momentum was so much in their favor. I don't know. The way that it works is not. It's kind of old. It's stuck in the past, if you ask me. And I feel like as long as it's like this, the Big 12 was down this year. It was generally not as strong power rating wise as it has been in previous years, but there were plenty of teams that I feel like they didn't get any attention because the patch they wore on their jersey, and not the one that told you which school they were. So, okay, my last little segment, I'm going to talk about. So for the next however many weeks, I'm just gonna go through. I might speed this up because 16 weeks sounds like a long time, but I'm gonna go through a Big 12 team and kind of just talk about their year, what happened, what the expectations were, whether or not they were met, what the outlook is. So I'm going alphabetically. So the first team is the Arizona Wildcats, who went on to finish, I believe, 4-8 overall, and 2-7 in the conference. And man, they were picked. I believe they were picked to be 5th in the conference before the year started. The way that the team looked pretty much the whole year was just not anywhere where anybody thought they'd be. Of course, McMillan, wonderful receiver, had tons of great moments. He was significant in all their games. And Noah Fafita was great too, for the most part. Both of them, the whole team just did not seem like it was working. I don't know. You expected that because the new coach they brought in had a lot of players, you had those 2 key players come back. Actually, a lot of their players did transfer out. But you had those 2 key players come back. You thought that there was a chance that they could still be really good. And with the Big 12 being as uncertain as it was going into this year, I could see how they ended up getting their 5th seed. But man, I remember watching them get blown out by K-State at the beginning of the year after K-State lost to BYU, I think. And it was one of those things where you're like, dang, is K-State really that good? And then you end up learning, no, Arizona was really not that good. And I don't know, if you look at their game against Arizona State, the way it's flipped in 1 year, credit to Kenny Dillingham, of course, but the way it's flipped in 1 year, they won 59-23, I think, last year in Tempe. And then this year, they get the chance to ruin their rival season at home, and they got destroyed. I think it was 41. No. I'm not sure what the score was, but I don't want to say an incorrect score. But they got beat up. It wasn't close. Yeah, I was looking to see if there was maybe going to be some shenanigans with losses or upsets, but it ended up being just, 21-0 by the early part of the game, and I think it was. I'm getting word that it was 49-7, so it was bad. Arizona for next year, what has got to change? Well, I don't know what their schedule is, but you kind of got to start over. You got to let Fafita go. McMillan's obviously entering the draft. He's going to be one of the best receivers that's ever played for you, but you got to kind of just start over. A lot of the fans wanted the head coach. I can't even remember what their head coach's name right now is. Sorry, but people want him gone after 1 year, and in the NIL era, that's not surprising. And with how good of 2 players they had in Fafita and McMillan, that's not surprising that the fans wanted something different. But I don't think it should be over just yet. I think there's a little bit of a weird transition. Mind you, Dave Aranda had Rule's players when he came in 2020. It was a weird year. They went 2-7, and the next year they won the Big 12. Just because something doesn't work year one, there's a lot of things that go into switching a coaching program over. And I want Arizona to be good. Arizona's fun when they're good. And it would be awesome for Arizona and Arizona State to both be really good with how Arizona State's looking. And it just, to me, it seems like there's a little bit of you don't really know what you have. What do you have? You've got like a team that kind of carried over a lot, but didn't carry over enough to have the talent to be good enough. And is that really the coach's fault? No, I mean, he could only try to come in and bring as many players. A lot of them went to Washington. But for next year, you're kind of just trying to rebuild from the ground up again. And who knows, with how fluctuating the landscape of the college football world is right now, you could go from being 4-8 and to being 10-2 the next year. It's kind of the way the NIL portal works, it's kind of the way NIL works and the transfer portal works. It makes it to where anybody can do anything at any time. But there's a lot of questions for Arizona State heading into next year, and there's not a lot of answers right now. I think they need to fill up some of the holes they have on their team. Kind of got to start fresh. It's a good thing for them. The year's over. They don't have to worry about kind of putting together a team for a bowl game. They'll just go into the offseason. They can try to work the transfer portal. They can try to bring in their guys and get them in early and start to get to work. You're going to need a buy-in from... If the administration is as out on the coach as the fans are, which hardly is ever the case, then you're not going to do anything. If they're bought in to what they believe that the coach can do, then you can do it. And I think it's possible. And it may not happen next year. You may still be bad next year because you're kind of starting over. But it just depends on how patient you're willing to be and how much you're willing to invest. And so, yeah, Arizona State, 10-3 last year, 4-3 this year, 4-8 this year. The change was big, obviously. Looking forward, I know they don't want to be at the bottom, and I know that they're going to do what they can to get better. So, for my Arizona State fan, or not my Arizona State, my Arizona Wildcats fans out there, I'm hoping your admin has hope in the coaching staff, and that they're putting him in a good position to succeed for the next few years, because if not, then this is not the time. This is the best time in the Big 12 to be on the rise. Colorado, Arizona State, Baylor, TCU, BYU, Iowa State, who knows? But yeah, like, if you're on the rise right now in the conference, there's a lot good that you can do. And so I think that's why there's a lot of coaching changes coming. Scott Frost coming in, West Virginia changing their coach up. You know, there's changes being made, and I think it's because people sense that in the Big 12, everybody has a chance right now, and this is the prime time for a team like Arizona State to establish themselves, a team like, Baylor or a team like TCU to come up and establish themselves as a mainstay for the years to come. And so I don't think Arizona should panic, but I do think there needs to be a sense of urgency with, guys, well, let's get this thing rolling. So, but yeah, so with that will be my last segment for the day. I just want to say, remember to follow me on Twitter. I'm going to try to be doing this hopefully once a week. If you have any suggestions, for the set, please let me know. DM me on Twitter, message me here on YouTube, whatever. However you want to get to me, just, don't show up at my house. But yeah, so I just want to. I mean, thank you all for watching. Thank you for spending your time listening to me talk about college football. And yeah, God bless, and you guys.